Hi guys, and welcome back from Carly at the Herbathicary. Really good to see you guys again. If you're new to the channel or like the videos, please show your support by hitting like and subscribe down below. So it's November 1st and the girlies and I had the best Halloween last night. However, we did get soaked and it was really cold, so not surprisingly we all have the snivels today. And on my ride into work, I noticed The Cure, as I do every year, just sat outside, rotting outside everyone's doors. We don't do that. So we brought ours in, and this video is what we do with our pumpkins post-Halloween, how to keep them going through as long as the winter as we can. We did have three rather large ones, so it did take a while to process them all, but we got there in the end. So I de-seeded as much of the pumpkin guts as I could last night before bed, but I didn't have time to do it all, so I just popped everything else in the freezer. But as you can see, there's still quite a few seeds in here, so when I actually come to use this, I will just thaw it out, pull the rest of the seeds out, and then this will go in a soup minus as much of the stringy guts as I possibly can. The other seeds that I did manage to get out though, we washed thoroughly, patted them dry, popped them on a baking sheet with a seasoning of choice. These ones were salt and sugar flavor, and popped them in the oven until they were nice and brown. I only keep them on 180, but there are different recipes for it. But now these are so nice and crispy. You can pull out the seeds, but they just crack. So we just eat the whole things like this. You can season them with cinnamon or with ginger, whatever it is you fancy. These ones had a bit more sugar on, and as you can see, they haven't lasted very long. They're almost done. The girls talked me into keeping the pumpkin that I did for a couple more days, or at least it'll last. So we're going to pop this somewhere cold and dry and enjoy it for the next couple of days and hope it lasts. So we started with Auntie Patty's pumpkin, and it was heartbreaking cutting it, as this is the first year my 7-year-old has carved her own pumpkin. So I do want to save the face section for a little while, so I'm going to cut that out, and I'm going to cut this in half. We will be using the two separate halves for different things. This larger half I'm probably going to roast straight away, so I'm going to give it a clean up. Now there is too much here for the first soup, as we're going to be having this one as a starter. So I'm going to cut it down to size, and then I'm going to cut out that stem section, but I do want to keep this whole with the skins on. My oven is preheating at 180, so I pop this pumpkin cut side up on an oven-safe tray. I seasoned it with some olive oil, some salt, some pepper, rosemary, thyme, nutmeg, ground ginger, some wild garlic I had, and a bit of parsley to finish it off. And then just popped it in the oven right side up at 180 for around 30 minutes. I did set it to 40 at first just because I needed the warning as I was busy. I'll check on that in about 25 minutes, but now it's on to the other half of the pumpkin to prep this for preservation. Now I will cut it into smaller, easier to work with slices first of all, as I find it's easier to peel it this way. And just using my vegetable peeler, I'll remove all of those skins and then get ready to separate them out. Now I do like to freeze my pumpkin bits in different ways, so once all that peel is gone, I'm going to work out how much I'm going to use for each method. So the first one I'm going to cut into meal-sized chunks that we can use just to go on the side of a roast or roast them separately. For these ones I really don't want the bits sticking together, so I'll cut them into chunks first of all, and then I'm going to lay them on some parchment paper on a flat baking sheet, and I'll pop these in the freezer to pre-freeze before I bag them up. This helps the pieces not stick together. I like to make sure that they don't touch as much as possible, but doing it in this method, you can just snap them apart. Now, we do normally like to use these reusable silicone bags. However, we've only got about 2 left, and I do need them for soups as they are leak friendly or leak proof. The second batch will most likely just be going in a soup, so these ones I don't mind so much if they do all stick together. So again, I'm just going to cut these in soup-friendly chunks as uniform as possible, and these ones can just go straight in a freezer bag and into the freezer for soup later. I do usually like to vacuum seal before freezing, but as I don't have my vacuum sealer with me, I do have a trusty straw. So all I do is pop this straw in, seal up to the edge as much as possible, holding that hole closed around the straw, and suck all that excess air out. Now my kids always giggle when I do this, but it does work. So these are nicely vacuum sealed and ready to pop in our freezer. Now I did have one piece left over, and as I said, the soup is a starter. For our main, I did pop in a chicken for later. So this one I'm just going to cut into these long shapes, and I will season those and put those on the side of the chicken with some other nice warm veggies. But as that won't be for a few hours, these two will go into a trusty freezer bag and be ziplocked and air sucked out, and they will go into the fridge till I'm ready to prepare them later. It's been around 30 minutes for our pumpkin in the oven, so it's time to flip it over, cut side down, and pop it in for another half hour, and just a few minutes to have a quick tidy up before prepping for our soup. And for this, I started by finely chopping 2 large onions. I will be using my pressure cooker today, however you can just use a pot on a hob. And to this I'm going to add a large knob of butter. Now if you want to keep the dish vegetarian, you can change this for a vegetable oil or a coconut oil of some sort. We're then going to add our onions and allow them to soften for a while. While they're doing that, so giving them a quick stir here and there. The sound has gone for my pumpkin about 5 minutes ago, so that's had a chance to cool off a bit so it won't burn my fingers. As you can see, the skin comes off quite easily once it's cooked. We stripped off most of it. There were a few little bits that I couldn't get with my fingers, so I just grabbed the knife, scraped those bits off. I then also cut any rough edges around the top and bottom where the stems were, cut off any bits that were still around the corner and all the corners, and then just pop that aside for a minute so we could finish off the soup base. My onions had softened quite nicely by now, so I added a large teaspoon of crushed garlic, seasoned with the same seasonings that I put on the pumpkin, and gave that a stir for about 5 minutes to let the butter soak up all the herbs. And then it was time to add the stock that we made. Now I'm using a bone broth that we made and froze about a week ago. However, use vegetable stock if you're vegetarian. There was about a cup and a half of this, so I will be topping it up with water. But now it is time to chop our carrots. I only used about half of one large carrot for this, as it was just to add a little bit of flavor and some more orange. I then turned my cooker down to around 40 degrees, 50 degrees Celsius, added my carrots and gave them a stir until the carrots had slightly softened. I then added about 1.5 liters of water. Might have to top some more up later, but we'll have a look. And allowed this to cook on low for about 15 minutes while the carrots softened. And then back to our pumpkin. Now I did realize at this point that I had a little more pumpkin than I needed for the soup, but that was handy as I will cut off this bit and use it in a pumpkin bread later. The rest of the pumpkin I just cut into cubes, bagged up that extra bit and popped it in the fridge to cool down a bit, so it's ready to make the pumpkin bread in a minute. And now it's time. The rest of the broth and the carrots have softened slightly, so it's time to add our pumpkin chunks in and give them a good stir. And then I will allow this to simmer on low, stirring it occasionally until the pumpkin and the carrots are nice and soft and I can mush this all down. But while that's happening, let's get on with the pumpkin bread. So my oven has preheated to 180. I've layered my cake tin and the pumpkin bit has cooled down in the fridge. So I'm just going to mush it with my potato musher. You can use a food processor, however it's not necessary. We're then going to add 3 eggs, give that a good mix in. About 15 mils of oil. We're using a mixture of rapeseed oil and olive oil. I find this keeps the cake moist for longer. We'll give that a good stir in. We're then going to add a dashing of cinnamon powder. Obviously you can use whatever seasoning you wish, nutmeg, 5 spices, whatever you like. We're then going to use a teaspoon of baking powder, half a teaspoon of baking soda. Give that a good stir in. Now I find if you let this sit, it is easier to stir in. About 1/4 of a cup of brown sugar. We're using Demerara. This sweetens it up quite nicely. We then added about a teaspoon of vanilla essence, a cup of milk, and mixed that all in, and then gradually added flour, normal plain flour, until we got a thick cake batter consistency. And it's time to scoop it into our greaseproof paper lined cake tin and pop it in the oven. It normally takes us about half an hour to 40 minutes till it's ready, nice and brown on top, or till it's nice and fluffy. You can smell it in the air and a skewer goes through and comes out clean. While that's baking away, I'm just going to blend up the soup, make it nice and smooth. And then to make it extra creamy, I'll be adding about half a tub of full fat cream and giving that a good mix in. I'm going to leave this on the heat for another 5 minutes before I serve it all up. But the pumpkin bread is done now and the kids absolutely couldn't wait for it. So we're going to have a little snack of that, and I'm also going to cut an extra piece, pop that back in the oven, which is still preheated, and we'll use that for croutons and the soup. But for now they're just going to snack on this, and it is so nice and spongy and absolutely gorgeous. But it is now time for our starter, so we're going to serve up our gorgeous soup, pop those crispy pumpkin bread croutons on top, a little bit of the cream to decorate, and then a sprig of parsley to help you digest all the goodies. If you guys found that fun like I did and useful, picked up maybe a tip or two, another item to go and research in your own time. Again, thank you guys for coming back to the Apothecary. It was great to see you again. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.